Hi, I'll pick up where I left off in the last video from the chapter on the Mordent in Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art des Klavier zu spielen. If Bach were to address the deficiencies in Kissin and Sokolov's playing, this would be a major theme to which many of those deficiencies would relate. Those deficiencies that aren't a result of mere misinformation from being simply ill-informed. So that dot in the fantasy would be one of those instances. The other deficiencies in their playing, it would boil down to this exact thing about the instrument holding the tone out for longer than many might believe. Bei den Exempeln mit A und B kann man anmerken, dass man, wenn ja die Zeitmaß so langsam wäre, dass auch ein langer Mordent zum Ausfüllen nicht hinreichen wollte, diese langen Noten dadurch verkürzt, indem man sie noch einmal anschlägt und ungefähr so vorträgt, wie wir in der Abbildung unter eben den Buchstaben sehen. Diese Freiheit muss man nicht anders als aus Not und Vorsicht brauchen. Man muss den Absichten des Verfassers eines Stückes dadurch nicht tort tun. Man wird diesem Fehler dadurch leicht entgehen können, wenn man durch den gehörigen Druck und durch die Unterhaltung einer Note gewahr wird, dass unser Instrument den Ton länger aushält, als viele glauben mögen. Man muss also bei Gelegenheit des langen Mordenten weder die Schönheit des Nachklangs verhindern und denselben sowie die übrigen, weder über jeder etwas langen Note anbringen, noch zu lange aushalten. Bei allen Ausfüllungen durch Mordenten muss allezeit noch ein kleiner Zeitraum übrig bleiben. Und der am besten angebrachte Mordent wird ekelhaft, wenn sich wie der Triller in einer geschwinden Verbindung an die folgende Note anschließt. And it's not that I want people to think less of Kissin and Sokolov. What I want to do is put this in perspective. I have no interest in reducing the actual achievements of Kissin and Sokolov. I'm only talking about the things where they haven't achieved, the things they haven't achieved. And Kissin and Sokolov, like I said before, I don't want to pick on them. It's just they are the top of the roll of honor. So you push them over, all the other dominoes fall after them. That's why I named them. It's like weight loss. It's the last few pounds that are the hardest to shift. Sokolov and Kissin's training is incomplete. It stops short at the point where they could become independent artists. And that can be heard in the mistakes of others they repeat or copy with complete obliviousness, or the new ones they add to the mix themselves. Where would they find someone who could improve their playing? It'd be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Everyone they encounter is going to be worse at the piano than they are, is going to be at a lower level than they are. I'm that needle, and the obscurity of my channel attests to that. I thought of providing examples, moments, that could be compared to the likes of Sokolov and Kissin, But it feels like a case of diminishing returns. I mean, a lot of effort and, you know. And so I'll just give one example for anybody who might be interested. The low left hand E flat in the second movement of K457. Listen to how long the instrument holds out the tone and compare that to all of the roll of honour. That is exactly what Bach is talking about and what I've been talking about. Pay attention to the ends of the notes. And this piano will be a lot lower quality. I mean, this piano will cost, you know, 6,000 or 7,000 euro to buy. Whereas the pianos you'll be listening to will cost 30, 40, 50, 80,000 euro. And how can it be that that E flat is longer on this piano when I play it than it is on any of your champions? Because it's exactly what Bach is talking about there. The instrument holds out the tone longer than many might believe. Holding out the tone, you have to pay attention to the ends of the notes. That's not done. And the irony is, all the focus is on the beginning of the tone, when it's struck. And the irony is, people have no clue. They cannot... They can't... They don't notice anything about when it's struck, but yet all the attention is put on there, and there's no attention put on to the end of the notes. None. And when you start to do, you'll notice how bad, how little the sustain or the ability of the instrument to hold out the tone is actually exploited by the roll of honour. By connecting the pieces of the puzzle, we can start to get a sense of the feeling Bach has for the roll of honour, for its professors, masterclass givers and performers, whose blow he was able to soften by spreading it out among the paragraphs of his book. But can we be brought to the surface by piecing it together? It is weak opponents that inspire the least mercy and the greatest contempt. That's the worst thing about the roll of honour. They're so weak and pathetic. In paragraph 20 from the chapter on trills, and you're going to feel that you need to protect them. You'll be afraid of putting them to the test, because you're afraid of what then, what when they fail, what when their weakness and how pathetic they are is exposed. Where do we go from there? So you'd much rather protect them, because by protecting them, you're protecting yourself. In paragraph 20 from the chapter on trills, he talks about the Druck and Unterhaltung of a note in much the same context as he does in paragraph 8. Es ist etwas Besonderes, dass durch eine unrechte Spielart gemeiniglich die besten und sangbarsten Stellen müssen verdorben werden. Die meisten Fehler kommen bei langsamen und gezogenen Noten vor. Man will sie der Vergessenheit durch Triller entreißen. It could be that the suggested tactic in paragraph 8 for such notes, shortening them and adding a mordent, was provided with this abuse of long notes in mind to reduce whatever carnage he could. Bach will know better than anybody what he wrote, and so he'll have he'll have his own thoughts in mind when he writes, when he comes back, when he touches on the same subject later on in the book. Das verwöhnte Ohr will beständig in einer gleichen Empfindung erhalten sein. Es empfindet nicht anders als durch ein Geräusche. Man sieht hieraus, dass diejenigen, welche diesen Fehler begehen, weder singend denken können, noch jeder Note ihren Druck und ihre Unterhaltung zu geben wissen. Sowohl auf dem Klavichorde als auf dem Flügel, our instrument, unser Instrument, singen die Noten nach, wenn man sie nicht zu kurz abfertigt. So I can compare that to the sentence in paragraph 8. Man wird diesem Fehler dadurch leicht entgehen können, wenn man durch den gehörigen Druck und durch die Unterhaltung einer Note gewahr wird, dass unser Instrument den Ton länger aushält, als viele glauben mögen. Now, I'm probably sure you're sick of your Roll of Honor professor or those, all those people on YouTube with their tutorials talking about that, because they're always talking about the essential and what's so important for piano playing. So I'll bet none of them left that out. But if I was betting real money, I'd bet they all left it out. And I'll bet none of them have a clue what Bach is talking about. Bring that to your professor. Bring that to any of them. Don't do it because they won't like you as a result. They'll quickly try and get rid of you. So don't do it for your own sake. You are their friend as long as you swallow their poison. If you start to question it, if you start to doubt it, you become the enemy quicker than you'll believe. So, I'll just read on with that paragraph 20 from the chapter on trills. So he said, sowohl auf dem Klavichord als auf dem Flügel singen die Noten nach, wenn man sie nicht zu kurz abfertigt. Ein Instrument ist hierzu geschickter verfertigt als ein anderes. So Bach is saying there, he's anticipating, no, the clavichord, the harpsichord doesn't, the notes don't sing as much as in the clavichord, because he's anticipating the roll of honor and how they talk, because they're so predictable. And so he's saying that, yeah, I know that one of the instruments is better adapted to it than the other. That doesn't matter. That doesn't affect what I'm saying, is what he's saying there. Bei den Franzosen sind die Klavichorde sogar sonderlich nicht eingeführt. He's saying in France, clavichords aren't that popular. Folglich setzen sie ihre Sachen mehrenteilt für den Flügel. They're not that popular, so what happens is they write their stuff for the harpsichord. The one that whose tone doesn't hold out the tone as long as the clavichord. And he says, dem ungeachtet sind ihre Stücke voller Bindungen und Schleifungen, welche sie durch die häufigen Bogen andeuten. So the French are not writing for the clavichord at all. They're writing for the harpsichord predominantly. Yet there's lots of ties and slurs in their music, and you can see that with all the bows they have. Why is that? If the instrument doesn't sing, explain that. And he says then, gesetzt die Zeitmaß wäre zu langsam und das Instrument zum gehörigen Nachsingen zu schlecht. So ist es doch allezeit schlimmer, einen Gedanken, der gezogen und matt vorgetragen werden soll, durch Triller zu verstellen, als etwas Weniges an dem deutlichen Nachklange einer Note zu verlieren, welches man durch den guten Vortrag reichlich wieder gewinnet. So that's how the caution looks that he was saying. When man's using this, you use it out of necessity and caution. That's what that caution looks like there. Es kommen überhaupt bei der Musik viele Dinge vor, welche man sich einbilden muss, ohne dass man sie wirklich hört. Zum Exempel, bei Konzerten mit einer starken Begleitung verliert der Konzertist allezeit die Noten, welche fortissimo akkompaniert werden müssen, und die, wobei das Tutti einfällt. Verständige Zuhörer ersetzen diesen Verlust durch ihre Vorstellungskraft. Diese Zuhörer sind es, denen wir hauptsächlich zu gefallen suchen müssen. The imagination stuff can be tested with the B-flat in Chopin's first ballade. How long do you hear it? The sudden and swift manner with which I lift my left hand from the keys. The direction in which I remove it activates the strings. That activation is picked up by the mic, but just barely. Turning up the volume will attest to this. So if you were to turn up the volume, I'm not recommending it, or good earphones, or whatever, you can probably hear it, like make it out. It is there. The attentive listener, or the intelligent or enlightened listener, the verständige Zuhörer, Aaron Copland, that composer, called them creative listeners, in their imagination will hear the tone end as my finger lifts up from the key. And the tone is there till my finger lifts up from the key, so that'll help. It's just not plainly audible. You could try it now to see if it works. It's not a question of if you have the ability. It's just a question of accessing it, paying attention to the tone, listening to it as it's struck, and holding onto it till my finger lifts, and seeing what your imagination starts to do in that time. Also, the same could be done with the end of Mendelssohn's Venetia Gondelman song, as I demonstrated being played according to the true way, as it's meant to be played according to the score. I challenge anyone to try and find one single person in the Roll of Honour who was able to do that. And this is not considered to be an advanced piece. So when one of your champions play that piece, they are playing what would be considered a piece would be for an easy piece. And if anyone wants to argue, could they please show me where Mendelssohn instructed the player to remove both their hands from the keys as soon as that last low F sharp has been struck, as if the keys were hot coals? None of them in the Roll of Honour are pleasing the enlightened listener with what they do. Bach will consider himself an enlightened listener. Here's some of paragraph 2, and that'll go, I read out that thing about, he says that these are certain signs of the bad way to play the piano. Because Bach is talking to the Roll of Honour. He is talking about the Roll of Honour. He is highlighting the difference between the true way to play and the Roll of Honour way, the cage way, the Lilliput way, the way of the metronomes, the bad way to play the piano. So ungegründet und widersprechend diese Beschuldigungen sind, so gewisset Zeichen sind sie doch der schlechten Art, das Klavier zu spielen. Eventually I will tie up everything. Bach's opinion of the Roll of Honour is going to be presented in its fullness. And I'll just read here a paragraph 2 as food for thought. Da diese Stücke nichts allzu bekannt sind, and those Stücke are correct fingering, good ornaments, and the good performance, der gute Vortrag, is still relevant today. Unfolglich so oft da wieder gefehlt worden. So hat man mehrenteils Klavierspieler gehört, welche nach einer abscheulichen Mühe endlich gelernt haben, verständigen Zuhören, das Klavier durch ihr Spielen ekelhaft zu machen. So, Bach is going to consider himself a verständige Zuhörer. When he is there listening, he is the verständige Zuhörer. And there's two types of listeners. The verständige Zuhörer, to which Bach will, to which he'll include himself. And there's the verwöhnte Ohr, the pampered ear, who just hear noise and who just want noise. And they're the ones who can't hear past the quality of the piano. And they're the ones where the quality of the piano will make the pampered ear think that the player is much better than they actually are. And they won't recognize a great player if the noise of the piano itself, the quality isn't there. They won't be able to hear past the quality of the piano to what the player's actually doing. And when the only person Bach can talk about here in that sentence is himself. In reality, he can't say what a listener, an enlightened listener, what these piano players, what the roll of honor are going to do, how they're going to respond to it. He can only talk about how he himself responds when he hears the roll of honor play. So he's the verständige Zuhörer here. And what's he saying? He is saying the roll of honor, through their playing, makes the piano ekelhaft. And ekelhaft is disgusting. And the big misunderstanding that'll be had here is, as soon as, whenever we're thinking about people in the past, we think of people who are less evolved, more backward than we are. And when he thinks of that, he'll think of, it'll be natural to think of people who are the equivalent to somebody who is kind of half learned a piece, is a beginner and who's fumbling and struggling, and he's going, stopping and starting and hitting all sorts of wrong notes and it's sounding awful. But this is not the abscheulichen Mühe he's talking about. Endlich gelernt haben. He's talking about, there's that saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. What's the biggest thing you are going to get from the roll of honor is how much they practice. What you'll hear in the stage, in the concerts, is the result of practice, practice, practice. You'll hear notes. You'll be bombarded with notes, and it'll be, I can relate to Bach's reaction there, because it's the same reaction I have when I hear the roll of honor, and I just hear like I'm bombarded with notes all the time, and it makes me want to give up the piano. It makes me want to have nothing to do with it, because it just looks like the result of like a horrible effort. And I don't want anything to do with that, because it looks like such a horrible life. Look at all the thousands of notes I can play now. I'll throw them in your face. I can relate to Bach's reaction. He's talking about that, and he's talking about the top roll of honor people. The Mühe he's talking about is the Mühe that the roll of honor go through, that that you'll hear everybody going to Juilliard or any of the colleges in their practice rooms, the hours, the repetition, the metronome work, all this stuff. the result of all that. You know, the passages that have been repeated thousands of times. And what did they learn? He's not talking about everybody. There's the pampered ear who'll be bombarded with the notes and they'll think, wow. They'll hear a noise and that's all they want. They just want a noise. He's talking about himself, the enlightened listener. This is how they're going to respond to the roll of honor. Man hat in ihrem Spielen das Runde, Deutliche und Natürliche vermisst. This is all about what he's saying about the instrument holding the tone out for longer than many might believe. And the Runde, Deutliche und Natürliche is vermisst. You'll hear terrible try conducting to my revolutionary etude that I put up there, and then try conducting to Kissin's etude. You'll think you're not able to conduct when you try to conduct to Kissin's because there's nothing to conduct to. With mine, you'll have no problem conducting to it. And you're bombarded with an onslaught of noise with Kissin that you'll think at the start, you know, because there's the piano quality and stuff that plays a role too, and the recording, miking, you'll think Kissin's is much faster than mine. But if you were to listen to it at twice the speed, you'll see that mine is actually much faster than his. Kissin is not as good as I am. He's not as good. You will not find a piece that we both play that he plays better than me. It doesn't happen. It's beyond his capability. This is what I am sharing here. This is what you have a chance of getting. In my playing, you will hear the Runde, Deutlich und Natürliche, but you have to start listening like an enlightened listener. You can't just hear the quality and not. Listen to it with earphones on. Listen, pay attention to the ends of the notes. So hingegen, anstatt dessen lauter Gehacke, Poltern und Stolpern. Again, people will angetroffen, people will misinterpret that and they'll think of the amateur. But we're talking about the same Gehacke, Poltern und Stolpern that you'll hear from the roll of honor. That you'll hear, you know, that they're not able to hold a quarter note for its proper length. All of this thing, that is what Bach is talking about. He's not talking about people who can't play. He is talking about the fast players from profession, the treffers, the one who hits all the right notes. He's talking about people who can, you know, play trills, double trills, who can do all sorts of runs, who can do all sorts of crossing over leaps. He talks about people who can span the width of a decima, which is, you know, it's from a C to an E. So not an octave, an 8/9, a tenth. Can span, and he says people who can even span the width of a duodecima, which is from C to the G. So a 14th. And they can do all that and more. They can transpose on the spot. They can do all that. He's describing the likes of Kissin and Sokolov, all these people. That's who he's talking about there. He is not talking about people who bash away on a piano like they haven't got a clue. That's where the big thing is. Indem alle andere Instrumente haben singen gelernt, so ist bloß das Klavier hierinnen zurückgeblieben und hat anstatt weniger unterhaltenden Noten mit vielen bunten Figuren sich abgeben müssen. Dergestalt, dass man schon angefangen hat zu glauben, es würde einem Angst, wenn man etwas Langsames oder Sangbares auf dem Klavier spielen soll. Man könne weder einen Ton an den anderen ziehen, noch einen Ton von dem anderen durch einen Stoß absondern. This technique there, you'll hear, this is differentiating one tone from the other through a push. That'll be key to phrasing ideas from in his father's music that the roll of honor aren't able to express. They have no conception of. Man müsse dieses Instrument bloß als ein nötiges Übel zur Begleitung dulden. You know, that's changed. The attitude there. The giants have disappeared. Lilliput become the new giants. So people are... That's changed. But what you're hearing is exactly the same. You're hearing as if, you know, like in Bach, any long note will be, you know, an ornament will be put on it. You know, it'll be all short notes, nothing but short notes, and you'll get the impression that, yeah, they do actually have an angst, like, oh shit, there might be a short note here, I better give it an ornament or something, instead of letting it sing. So ungegründet und widersprechend diese Beschuldigungen sind, so gewisse Zeichen sind sie doch der schlechten Art, das Klavier zu spielen. Bach's, it's against the same people that it's against the roll of honor. Bach is to counteract the roll of honor that Bach has written his book. Bach is the verständige Zuhörer, he's the enlightened listener. And the roll of honor can pat themselves on the back because they make the piano for the likes of him disgusting. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll pick up where I left off in the next video. Thanks. Bye.